I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, another woman may sue the city of San Diego over sexual harassment claims. And the rim fire continues to burn out of control near Yosemite.
City Council President Todd Gloria joins me to talk about his role as interim San Diego mayor, and I'll talk to City Attorney Jan Goldsmith about whether the settlement with Bob Filner was a good deal for taxpayers. And San Diegans will head to the polls to elect a new mayor for the second time in nearly a year. We'll analyze what's to come.
Former state assemblyman and mayoral candidate Nathan Fletcher says he'll run for mayor again, this time as a Democrat. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The Secretary of State says the evidence of a chemical weapons attack in Syria is undeniable. John Kerry told reporters there must be consequences for the attack. The U.S. and its allies in Europe appear to be laying the groundwork for the most aggressive response since Syria's civil war began more than 2 years ago. PBS NewsHour will have more on this developing story tonight at 7. Another city employee has filed a claim against San Diego Mayor Bob Filner, and she may sue the city. Stacy McKenzie works in the Parks Department. She says Filner touched her inappropriately at an event on April 21st.
Filner came right up behind me, not aside of me, right up behind me. I didn't know who it was. And his right arm came around and it grabbed my neck. And it was a tight grab because his hand was resting here. His left arm came around and clamped onto my arm, and then he was rubbing it.
McKenzie's claim is for $500,000 and includes the names of 2 witnesses. More than 180 San Diego firefighters are in Northern California at this hour helping to battle the rim fire. It's one of the largest in state history, burning just outside of Yosemite National Park. More than 230 square miles have burned in 8 days. The fire is threatening 4,500 structures and San Francisco's water supply. It's about 15% contained tonight. San Diego City Council President Todd Gloria steps in as interim mayor of the city next week. But what does that exactly mean? Amitha Sharma is in for Peggy Pico tonight with more.
At 5:01 p.m. Friday, City Council President Todd Gloria takes over as San Diego's new mayor, just as disgraced Mayor Bob Filner's resignation becomes official. Gloria is here to talk about his new job duties and whether he wants the position to be permanent. Todd, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, people on the inside at City Hall say it's been a grueling 6 weeks. Is that because city business ground to a halt, or is it simply because of the uncertainty of leadership?
I think it's both. There certainly is now a sense of relief. I think that this is now going to be put behind us. But it was very difficult, I think, for our 10,000 city employees to open the paper every day and see something written, for any of our citizens to watch late night news and just the shame that was really brought to the city. We're moving past that now, and so I think I see a collective sigh of relief on the faces of all of our folks at City Hall.
How do you, as interim mayor, plan to help pick up the pieces and get the city back on track?
Well, I hope to start by projecting some calm and hoping that folks can begin to heal, and then we start cleaning things up, and that starts with a department review, top to down, every department. I've asked our interim chief operating officer, Walt Eckert, to do that. We'll start releasing the things that have been held up and bottled up in the mayor's office, public information requests and other things, and we'll get moving back to the initiatives that are going to make our city great. Things like our new central library that opens in September, Coastal Commission consideration of our convention center expansion in October. There are big issues that are coming up in front of us in the next few months, and we're going to be aggressively pursuing all of them.
So what powers do you have as an interim mayor, and what powers do you lack that an elected mayor has?
It's easier to enumerate what I don't have, and that would be the veto. Mayor obviously can veto council actions. I won't have that opportunity, although I still will be a member of the city council and able to vote on matters. And you know, there's sort of limitations on very long-term projects or initiatives, but I think that we can work collaboratively with the city council and the city attorney's office to make sure the things that need to be done will get done.
Do you plan to run for mayor?
I haven't made that decision yet. I've really been focused on trying to solve this crisis. You saw me work with Jan Goldsmith and Kevin Faulkner to resolve this issue with the mayor. I'm now focused on the transition to the interim mayor's office, and I think once I feel comfortable in that, we'll make a decision about whether or not to pursue this permanently.
How long do you expect that to take? I mean, by when do you hope to have made a decision?
Not too much longer. I recognize this is a quick turnaround, but I think anyone who knows me knows that I don't act rashly. I try and really think things through, and this is a big decision, and a decision that I didn't think I'd have to make even a month ago. So we're going to give it some time and just make sure that whatever I decide is in the best interest of the city.
So you've received campaign contributions from real estate agents, contractors, developers. There are critics who say that you don't quite stand up for progressive causes, even though you're a Democrat. What's your response to that?
It's baloney. I've spent my whole life as a Democrat working on democratic issues. My core values are incredibly progressive. I think what people really pick up on, though, is that I recognize that Democrats don't have the monopoly on good ideas, and I've always been willing to work with Republicans and independents to get things done, particularly for my council district. But as far as my values, they are progressive as they come. And with regard to developers and things of that nature, I think you've seen me work time and again to hold developers accountable. I think of things like the Navy Broadway complex, expansion of a high school in my district, areas where I stood up to developers, and I don't think that would be any different, provided their projects are not good. And in those cases, I didn't think their projects were good.
And in 15 seconds, what kind of mayor does San Diego need right now?
I think we need someone who can bring the city together. This mayor did not do that. That was a critically missing piece. And I think we need someone who can help heal the city. The city's really broken at the moment. I think we're hurting. We want to get past that, and I think we will.
Todd Gloria, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Now, Mayor Bob Filner will resign at the end of the week, and plans for a special election to replace him is already underway. Former State Assembly member Nathan Fletcher was the first to submit paperwork. KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Burks caught up with Fletcher today, and she joins us from the News Center. Sandia, Nathan Fletcher ran for mayor the last time around as an independent. This time he'll be a Democrat. What did he say his priorities will be?
Well, he said in many ways he will pick up where his previous campaign left off. He says that in the last election, the candidates were divisive and combative, and he says he wants to bring a more collegial attitude to City Hall and to the mayoral race. And he talked about education. He just dropped his son off for his first day of school, and he says improving public education is going to be a big plank in his platform.
And what did Fletcher say about continuing any part of Mayor Filner's programs and goals?
Well, Fletcher says Filner had some really strong ideas that shouldn't go away just because the mayor is going away, like placing emphasis on neighborhoods.
We're never going to be one as a city when we have certain neighborhoods that have been left behind. And when you go into these neighborhoods and you see communities that don't have sidewalks and they don't have streetlights, and you see crime increasing, and you see a lack of basic services, you understand their frustration. And I think the first commitment we have to do is to rebuild San Diego, starting with our neighborhoods, and rebuild them all.
And who else is planning to run at this point?
As of this afternoon, there are 4 names joining Fletcher's, and there's sure to be more. But by far, so far, Fletcher's is the most familiar with San Diegans.
KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Burks. Now, we also learned today another city employee is filing a sexual harassment claim against Mayor Filner. Amita Sharma is speaking with the city attorney who says he doesn't believe this will be the last one to come forward.
Bob Filner agreed to resign last week only after the San Diego City Council agreed to cover the cost of his defense in a sexual harassment lawsuit filed by his former communications director. City Attorney Jan Goldsmith helped hammer out that agreement with Filner. He joins me now. Before we get into the details of that settlement agreement, another city worker has come forward. Her name is Stacey McKenzie. She worked for the Parks Department for 32 years. She says that Bob Filner put her in a headlock, grabbed her, and fondled her. Is the city obligated to defend her claim if it turns into a lawsuit?
Yeah, it hasn't been filed as a lawsuit yet, but the answer to that question is we would provide a joint defense through our office of the city and Mr. Filner the way we do with any employees. He would sign a waiver allowing our office to provide defense to both. It doesn't cost us anything really more, all that much. We just file one answer and all that. Importantly, we preserve the right to seek reimbursement against him, we being the city, should there be a judgment against the city arising out of his conduct. What's more, should he be hit with punitive damages, that's completely on his nickel.
So give us a tally, though. How many women have actually filed sexual harassment claims against the city?
Well, we're aware of maybe 3 or 4, but during the time that he was gone for the 2-3 weeks, my office sent investigators all over City Hall. They've interviewed over 50 people, and we have a fairly good idea of what has happened. Not everything, because Mr. Filner got around a lot. But we had spoken with Stacy. We understand what her accusation is and what allegedly happened, and we understand about others.
So the city has settled with Bob Filner. They've agreed to pay the $98,000 to his personal attorneys, and they've agreed to provide his defense in the sexual harassment lawsuit filed by his former communications director, Irene McCormick-Jackson. What's the status of that lawsuit at this point?
Well, it's still ongoing. And
what kind of leverage does she have now that the city has settled with Bob Filner?
Well, I'm going to talk in terms of what the situation is, and let Irene and her lawyer, Gloria Allred, determine their leverage, and they're negotiating and whatever. But Irene remains an employee and a valuable employee of the city of San Diego. She never lost her job. As soon as the claim was made, the assistant chief operating officer, Scott Chadwick, brought her into his office and to do communication work. The interim mayor, Todd Gloria, has indicated she will be the communication director for the interim mayor. As an employer, we have an obligation to step up to the plate. That's why we do have an obligation to provide a joint defense, at least defend the city, and we have an obligation to pay damages should there be sexual harassment by a supervisor, including the mayor. We also have an obligation to take interim measures, and within 5 weeks, we removed a sitting mayor of the eighth largest city in the country. It was an amazing step taken by this employer. So, from the standpoint of talking with the jury, 2 years from now, should a case go to trial, I think the city of San Diego, as employer, has a very good record of responding to this situation.
City Attorney Jan Goldsmith, thanks for speaking to us today.
Thank you very much.
We are back with our Second Opinion series, where we answer your questions about the Affordable Care Act. Joining me from the News Center to answer this week's question, Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks. Megan, a recent state survey shows 1 in 4 registered voters know very little about how Obamacare will affect them. So what are we talking about tonight?
Well, I got a call from Oscar Ramos. He's a teacher at the Price School at UC San Diego, which serves low-income youth. He wants to know how parents who are in the country illegally go about getting their children who are citizens insured. Here's Ramos.
So I'm a high school teacher, and I also have a group of students that I advise throughout their high school years and into college. Within the roles of my advisory work, I want to make sure that my advisory students and their families have healthcare coverage if they qualify for it. There's only so much that we can do when a class, if the students are unhealthy. I've seen some issues with students where they are in real need of health care. When they don't have access to health care and you see those problems playing out in class, it's just so obvious that we have to cover everyone. So my question about the Affordable Care Act is how the Affordable Care Act will affect the insurance coverage availability for U.S. citizen children with undocumented immigrant parents. For me, it's very personal because that was my family situation, which is why I'm so interested in this. I was born and raised here. My parents were undocumented, and they got their amnesty in 1986. So I always look out for those situations with my students and make sure that we support them as well as we can.
So what if one of his students does have parents who are undocumented?
Well, parents who don't have legal status cannot access the new health benefits for themselves, but they can access them for their kids who were born in the U.S. So they could sign their children up for Medi-Cal or buy them a plan through the state-run insurance exchange Covered California. And they'll also qualify for subsidies on those health plans.
Can they do that without a Social Security number?
Yeah, for Medi-Cal, you only need a Social Security number for the child getting covered, and you don't have to file taxes to prove household income. Proof can be as unofficial as a written note from your employer. Covered California does ask you to have an individual taxpayer identification number or an ITIN, and you have to start filing taxes if you don't already.
It sounds like Ramos will have to ask parents to come out of the shadows, if you would. Do they need to worry about sharing such information?
Well, the answer from health officials is an emphatic no. They say applications for health insurance are never shared with immigration officials. For more details and to ask your own question about the Affordable Care Act, go to kpbs.org/second opinion.
Speaks City Heights reporter Megan Burks. San Diego's marine resources and research have long been used to educate the world on what's happening below the sea surface. Now, a new facility in La Jolla gives the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, an indoor ocean lab to do their research. From tiny fish and sea creatures to crabs and endangered abalone, NOAA scientists have been studying the ocean floor off Southern California for decades. They were the first to identify many species of baby fish or plankton to determine what they would become.
Nobody knew what they grew into just by looking at the planktonic version.
Wow.
And our scientists figured that out years ago, and the legacy of that research is carried forward.
Lieutenant Fiona Matheson with NOAA Corps got her early training at the lab in La Jolla and says the new facility brings all of that research and archival information into a more efficient space. Most of the science starts in the dissection area, where they look at individual fish to determine age, health, and species. There's the experimental aquarium, where fish are spawned and tested to see how they react to different environments. And then there's the tech tank or ocean within a building for developing new sampling vehicles, platforms, and testing sensors.
And our scientists not only are using technology, they're inventing it, they're developing it.
Such as optical tools which allow them to take samples without disturbing endangered marine life. So the intellectual information gained in La Jolla can be shared with scientists around the world. The new NOAA lab took 15 years to complete and is a stone's throw from the old facility in La Jolla. It opens to the public tomorrow. San Diegans are looking beyond Mayor Filner's resignation and on to finding a permanent replacement. Amitha Sharma has some insight on who else might be considering a run.
Mayor Bob Filner's resignation amid sexual harassment allegations and a state criminal investigation means San Diegans will head to the polls to elect a new mayor for the second time in nearly a year. Former District Attorney Paul Pfingst and political scientist Carl Luna join me to talk about what lies ahead for both Filner and the city of San Diego. Paul, a spokeswoman for California Attorney General Kamala Harris, said Friday that the state has opened a criminal investigation of Filner. It's the most broad statement that's been uttered by authorities so far. How serious does a problem does Bob Filner face?
That is a very bad thing for Bob Filner, because the announcement of opening a criminal investigation is almost always followed by a criminal charge. Whether that charge would be a felony, misdemeanor, or a series of either one, it's hard to say. But that announcement would indicate that the probability of criminal charges is high.
Carl, let's talk about this special mayoral election now. Nathan Fletcher has signaled his intention to run. He ran last year but didn't make it into the runoff. He has been labeled a political opportunist because he went from being a Republican to an independent, and then in May of this year he switched to the Democratic Party. Does that label stick, or is this election his to lose?
Well, it's a combination of both. It's like that old song, Karma Chameleon. He's been a chameleon. The question is it'll be good karma for him. He might be in the right place at the right time. If Democrats really want to coalesce around a candidate who has the best chance of winning as a moderate who attracts independents, he might be their guy. But the idea that he's also something of a carpetbagger, he's going to have to deflect those charges.
Paul, so Fletcher has a backing of business heavyweights in town like Malin Burnham and Irwin Jacobs. How far does that support go in helping him?
Well, this is tough because when he goes in front of environmental groups and labor groups, they're going to ask him about quotes that he gave when he was a Republican. And he's going to have to either say, I've changed my mind on those beliefs that I espoused so vigorously back then, or I haven't changed my mind. If he hasn't changed his mind, then he's not going to be popular among labor and environmental groups, which are very important constituency for the Democratic Party. If he says, I have changed my mind, then you can expect his opponent is going to run ads saying, this is what he said then, this is what he's saying now. Which do you believe?
Carl, the labor unions who supported Bob Filner, the Democratic Party who supported Bob Filner, took a big hit because there are people who are saying, look, you all did not fully vet your candidate. How big of a body blow is this to the Democratic Party? How big of a body blow is it to labor?
Well, it certainly did not hurt or did not help the brand. And what the party and labor have to figure out is how do we get a winning candidate who can put it all behind us? To put in Bob Filner and have him resign and then to back a losing candidate, that would be a double whammy, which would set back the cause of progressives in town for a couple of election cycles.
Well, let's look at the cause of progressives. One of the reasons that Bob Filner had so many supporters, at least until the end, is that a lot of people said, you know, this is a guy whose platform consisted of putting neighborhoods first, of putting the working man first, giving him a voice at the table. Do you see a candidate out there who might continue that legacy?
I think the question now is, what's the mood of the electorate in light of Filner? Because timing is everything in politics. The issues you espouse just may not be the right issues for the right time, but somebody else may have an issue that's very timely. So what is the mood of the electorate in terms of what they're looking for? What are we looking for in a mayor now? Is it a slow and steady wins the race, or is it somebody who's flashy and with some glitz on the table? What is that person? I don't think we're going to know that answer until Election Day. A big trauma has taken place in the electorate. That trauma is only going to be slightly removed on the first Election Day, 90 days from resignation. So what is going to be the mood of the voters? And that's something political consultants are going to be polling about from now up until Election Day to find out how this has affected the normal voter.
What do you think the mood of the electorate is now?
The mood of the electorate is get away from Bob Filner and try to move on. Can you find somebody who's like a Jerry Sanders, who is steady, somebody dynamic, and Nathan Fletcher, maybe a hybrid, you know, where you get a dynamic Jerry Sanders sort? I think the personality of the candidate is going to matter more in this than in the typical election. And on the first day you file, that's pretty much the personality the public will know. You don't have a lot of time to reinvent yourself in a short window of campaigning.
The key may be temperament.
I think this will be a big election about temperament.
I want to wrap, though, with this question. 4 of the 8 mayors who've been elected since 1963 have had to resign. Where does the fault lie? With the politicians who can't get it together, or the voters who can't pick a good candidate?
If you're running a democracy, the fault always lies with the voters. I mean, they may con you, but it's ultimately you bought the con. And the question is, do the voters learn from this and learn to ask some more questions ahead of time of their candidates and try to get the candidates they not only deserve, but need?
Paul, jump in. 10 seconds.
I don't have a clue. It's just been an extraordinary different reasons for everybody resigning. It's not the same thing over and over again. Filner brought a new thing than Dick Murphy did. Dick Murphy was slow and steady, wonderful, everybody liked him guy. But financially, it was a disaster. Bob Filner was something entirely different than Dick Murphy. So there's nothing that strings them all together. So this election is going to be, everybody hold on to your hat, and on one day, on Election Day, people will decide.
Paul, Carl, we've got to close it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Bit of sticky, humid weather moving in. A flash flood warning is up for most of the county, especially the mountain and desert areas. Heavy rain Sunday caused flooding in several homes and blocked roadways near Borrego Springs. Here's the forecast for the next few days. Cloudy and humid along the coast, low 80s tomorrow, 90s inland with a chance of showers Tuesday. Thunderstorms possible in the mountains with flood warning through Tuesday. Rain is expected in the desert with temperatures above 100 tomorrow. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Good night.